Okay. Good morning. It's always hard, first session in the morning, to get a crowd. Not really sure how that works here these days. It's also not of the COP right now. Yeah, just checking. But more people will come in, I'm pretty sure. With your headset, it works. But if, yeah, you can use them or not. Good morning. I'm Henk Ovink, Executive Director for the Global Commission on the Economics on Water. Honored to moderate this, your first morning panel. And I was former ambassador for water for the Kingdom of the Netherlands and led the UN 2023 Water Conference. In the lead up to that conference, the Netherlands embarked on a mission to ensure that we value and govern water differently. And started with an economic review inspired by Stern and Dasgupta, but contrary to Stern and Dasgupta, but with high respect, of course, for both of them. Instead of academic reports, we want a global effort, really uniting the many voices that should learn and understand the values of water in a commission. So instead of an academic report by one excellent academic, we brought together a group of voices from around the world, from every background, every generation, every continent. And that represents also where these values of water play out in our society and economy. Having this group together in itself was already part of the effort. 2/3 of the commissioners and the co-chairs never worked on water so intensely before. Some never even. But bringing them together from all aspects from energy, finance, climate, biodiversity, government, private sector, NGOs, activists, academia, was of critical importance to one, raise that understanding of the complexity of the hydrological cycle, and second, move forward towards opportunities to do something about it. So I'll stop there. I can, of course, talk about this for the rest of your day, which is not the intent of this session. We are here to look at that part of the report. You can find it online on the watercommission.org, the executive summary and the full report, in its relationship to the climate agenda and how important that is. In the lead up to all these other moments, we have 3 Rio Convention COPs this year, we have a Ramsar COP next year, and we have a UN 2026 Water Conference the year after. Those are stepping stone moments in the opportunity to really take action, bold action, on the institutional, on the policy, on the finance, and of course on the innovation, on the actions on the ground. And I think it's in this mix that we bring together an amazing group of leaders in 2 panels. First, we start with 3 commissioners from the Global Commission on Water, and then we have experts, leaders from the field in the second. We start with the panel, and I invite commissioners already on stage. Naoko Ishii, Professor and Director of the Center for Global Commons at the University of Tokyo. Mayun, founder of China's Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs. And Liz Watuti, founder of the Green Generation Initiative, all 3 commissioners on the Global Commission. And then we go to a panel with Jerker Tamalander, Director of Science and Policy for Ramsar, His Excellency Riaz Hamidullah, Ambassador and Foreign Secretary at the Bangladesh government, Dr. Amgad El-Mahdi, MENA and Water Sector Lead for the Green Climate Fund, Daniel Themen, Senior Climate Change Specialist at EIB, European Investment Bank. We're here in your pavilion. Thank you for hosting us. And then we will be joined by Jesus Alcazar, who's there, Socio-Economic Analyst for the European Commission. And Shaima Hussain Gargash will jump in and out. She's from the UAE and making sure that she makes the link to the 2026 Water Conference. But before we get to the second panel, first, Naoko, Mayun, and Liz, please join me on stage. Yeah. I hope your COP is going well. There is a microphone on a chair to share. There's 2 of them. I will ask you all, because we have a short time of this morning, all one question or one perspective from the Commission. The Commission's report is very rich, so we can talk about it, as said, quite a long time. But for now, let's focus on 3 aspects. And with you, Naoko, on the valuing as a global common good of this hydrological cycle, the economics, equity, and environmental sustainability of that. What is this common good aspect and the importance of this from the Commission's voice?
Very good morning to everyone. Is this working? Good. Thank you. Well, I am one of those non-water specialists that Hank was talking about, so I may have some excuse not to really know nitty-gritty of the water itself, but I came from more like a global commons angle. What do we mean by global commons? How to manage those global commons? So let me start with that question. Our report based on science. The science really discovers recently that a water cycle, hydrological cycle, which usually is considered more like blue water, that the river and lakes, actually does also include the green water, that the water cycle, hydrological cycle, circulating actually moisture cycle that from land to forest to the air to then coming back to us. That the green water cycle is something quite new to, at least to me. So when we talk about hydrological cycle, we should include not only the blue water, which we always see with our eyes, but this green water, which is more like a moisturing cycling, but which is extremely important as a water cycle, because half of the rain comes from this green water. Then another very, and they are actually traveling without border, across the border. Blue River also sometimes across the national border, but then the green water cycle really travel across the countries, even across continents. So something happened in Amazon does have an impact on the Africa. So that's a very important nature of the water as a global common good. But the second important scientific discovery recently is this water cycle, both green and blue, are out of balance. Some of you may know that planetary boundaries, that Johan Rockström and his group identified 9 important natural the functions which make the planet as a very stable and resilient. But that group also find out 6 out of 9 we have already transgressed, and this water, both blue and green, is one of those 6 which we have already out of the balance. So this our challenge, going back to the Hank's question, how to govern the water as a global common good, actually has very important points. One aspect is how to govern this global common good, but another thing is that how we can really do this as a nature, or how to strike the balance of this water cycle back to the stable and resilient planetary system. So these 2 challenges we need to address. So our report actually presented, as Hank mentioned, new way of governing the water cycle as a global common good. I think I want to stress maybe 3 important recommendations out of it. Number 1, because we now know the water cycle is out of balance. Out of balance means that we are not in harmony with the water cycle. Is not necessarily we are not in harmony with the water cycle or planetary boundaries. It's now our term that we, the human, have to transform our way of economic activities. What do we mean by water cycle? That we need to really think about where this out of balance coming out. It's very important for us to how to transform the food system, how to transform the land management, because these are the important factors and where this out of balance factor comes from. So it's very interesting, this report focus. Number 1 recommendation is how we manage differently the food system transformation. The second one is how to manage this conservation restoration. These are 2 important factors which creates that the water as global common good and out of cycle. So that's number one recommendation. The second thing is that the water is also a global common good. And as I mentioned, it actually the travel across borders and even across continents. What does it mean in terms of governing this global common good? The traditional way of governing goods or common doesn't really work for water. So we really need to find a way to govern this global common good aspect. And there is always a tension there, the national sovereignty versus the global common aspect. So do we have a good governance mechanism? Not yet. That the river has some of them. That because we know how to manage this river as a transnational thing. But this green cycle, green water cycle, has never been really a part of our governing structure. So how we can create this? That's a second challenge. The third challenge is also mentioned by Hank, that the water is a very important of nature, natural capital, and we really don't know how to govern the natural capital. And then are we able to find the true value of nature or natural capital? The water is a part of that? Not really yet. So these are three challenges, in my view, coming out of this report. Very quickly, that our recommendation. Number one, thinking about how to govern collectively this global common good aspect. Report ambitiously present one idea. It's a global water pact. So that has never been really fully emphasized yet, but it's good time for us to think about that maybe as something very much needed. On the second point about valuing the nature, valuing the water, it may be very much related, the fact Majun may be presented, how to measure the water, but how to put a valuation of the nature, the water as a natural capital and global common good. We haven't really found out exactly how to do it, and that because water is also the lifeline for many of the people, it's not really easy to put a kind of monetary value of the nature, because water means very, very different things to very, very diverse group of the people. So how we can really govern that and put an valuation of the water as a natural capital, but also global common good. I will be ending my last point. That is also one mechanism how to finance it. We, among many, many recommendations, we put in a just water partnership. And my interpretation of this just water partnership is to understand the water means very different things to the very diverse group of people. We need a multi-stakeholder coalition to think about how to put the valuation of the water and how to distribute that water and how to make sense that this is equitably in just distribution, valuation of the distribution. Think about river basin, which is used by industrial agriculture, that the lifeline and the tourism and many, many other aspects of the water. But we need to create a kind of governing mechanism to bring all those stakeholders together and to think about what would be the best way to put the valuation of the water. So let me stop here and thank you, Hank.
Thank you, Naoko. And thank you for, next to highlighting the importance of the global common good on the hydrological cycle, the overview of the report, because it gives us a far better understanding of understanding this complexity differently and how valuing leads to governing, leads to policy packages, leads to implementation and therefore impact on the ground, which is so important. And second, also making the link to how we manage our lands, our agriculture and industrial investments, destroy our natural capital in a way that they undermine the stability of this hydrological cycle and make a direct link to climate change. Thank you. Majun, going to you. And with the perspective from your expertise in the Commission, the focus on the missions and enablers, and especially I think perhaps in the your own organization and your work, focus on data. Can you share your insights as a commissioner to the audience?
Thank you, Hank, and very good morning and to everyone. And it's an honor to join this commission. And I want to highlight the another findings of this commission, which is on the need for adequate data for effective water management. In the context of managing water as a global common good, global data, water data with unified standards become a key element for governments, businesses, and for communities. For governments, having access to water data is very important. It enables, we're talking about enabler. It enables better governance system as it promotes evidence-based policy making and helping to benchmarking of best practices at all the local and regional levels. Of course, it also creates accountability. And the positive effects of water data can also be seen for private sector and civil society. Companies, they can be hugely benefited if water data becomes available, both. And it can help them really make sound, and more cost-effective solutions through the supply chain management and water management. And for citizens, it is critical. If we want the citizens to be involved in managing the water issue, then in joining the decision making, then we must provide them access to all this water data and helping them also to make those informed choices as citizens, as consumers, so that they can influence the government and also influence the corporate behavior. I think fundamentally this is the rights to know to the people. And now, as the water issue have been elevated from regional level, it's still very much a local issue. Varies locally. But in the meantime, it also been elevated on a global level, because of the climate change and many other effects. So we need to provide them also with sufficient data on that as well. Now, do we have water data? Need to achieve this? No. I mean, we found that it's far from being adequate, and there are two major factors being identified. One is fragmented and incomplete data collection. Of course, there in many parts of the world, what we found is there are data available. They buried very deep. They are fragmented and hard to access. So there's a need to create some infrastructure to collect them. And then secondly, it's the declining. In some of the regions, the quality and comparability of water matrix is actually declining instead of being improved. So with that, this commission also made recommendations. One is the key one is to recommendation to build a global water data infrastructure. A comprehensive and interoperable data system is essential to provide accurate science-based insights for sustainable water management and informed decision making. To properly do this, we must strengthen local and global data collection and reporting capabilities and make sure that of course, we need to also make sure local communities, their perspectives, their findings are also embedded in the process. I think all these new tools, all this development of IT technology make it far more possible to do that. We have we have a Blue Map app, which allows our users to take a picture and within 10 meters of dirty and black and smelly water and reported that. And it can be easily shared on social media and also go directly into the ministry's reporting platform and helping to check the pollution of thousands of rivers and canals. And secondly, I think promoting the corporate disclosure, I think it's a key issue. Corporate, I don't mean just all these dye houses or paper mills and petrochemical companies, but also centralized wastewater systems. Now, I'm talking about the development of IT technology. What happens in our part of the world is over the past 10 years, this is the 10th anniversary of our Clean Water Action Plan. And from that time, all these major water emitters, tens of thousands, are required to report their water emission discharge every 2 hours to the public. every 2 hours. And on our national quality, water quality monitoring scheme, 4,000 monitoring stations now reported water quality every 4 hours to the public. So it's getting far more real time, and it's getting costly, more cost effective. So I think now there's a ways to do that. I hope that things can happen more on the global level, and the need to develop disclosure rules and standards, not just on the listed companies. I think we need that to be drilled down to the facility level. I think that if we have that data, then supply chain management will be totally different. Now, many brands, because we are tracking the performance of some 19 million corporations operating in China, many of them water emitters, and this have become a unique resource for major brands sourcing from China. They tap into the data, and whoever have violations or problems, that will feed directly into, they got a push notification on their cell phone and of the managers of those major brands, and if they don't solve the problem, then the contract could have problems. I think globally there's a need to really track wherever the companies are going, and helping the local communities to access that data and come together to create corporate accountability. Thank you.
Thank you, Majun. And thank you for making the links between, on one hand, that having this set and unified set when it comes to water data, at the same time, how important it is led and driven, accessible data, in the combination, of course, with transparency, accountability, and of course, disclosure. So, in the importance of moving this forward. Liz, finally, to page on the Commission's report, can you talk a bit on the youth action agenda you had in the Commission, and perhaps its relationship to the justice framework?
Thank you. I'm really grateful to be part of the Commission, and especially bringing in the perspectives from the work we do at the local level with communities, and also the perspective of the interlinkages between biodiversity and climate, and of course the youth water agenda, which actually now we were able to have a youth preface within the report that you can actually read on and expound more. I think one thing that was very critical is the fact that justice and equity must be at the center if we are to address the global water crisis. And in the water sector, basically justice has mostly been defined from the basin-wide approach, the national approach, the local level, looking at mostly how the sources and the assets of water and the supplies are not to be polluted, and also looking at how people must prioritize the uses of water, and to a very small extent looking at how decision-making spaces are inclusive. And so within the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, this definition actually goes beyond to actually address key components like the rights of the indigenous people, and also looking at how we can prioritize the sharing of water equitably, and looking at especially the perspectives on both the blue water and the green water that connects communities, that connects countries, and that transboundary approach to water that must ensure that water is shared equitably, and also now balancing the needs of different riparian states and reducing harm to others, basically across the different countries, and looking at it from the very global perspective, and ensuring that the global water governance is inclusive enough and has also the young people, the private sector, the governments, and looking at how we can define this to what we're calling the just water partnerships. And of course, this is also building a lot on the Earth Commission's Earth System Justice Framework, which has now gone further to explore what it means actually to restore the hydrological cycle for people, for future generations, and also for all the living beings. And this is by recognizing and valuing the diverse knowledge systems. We have the diverse knowledge systems, especially from the indigenous communities who have protected the biggest percentage of what we are benefiting right now in terms of both the blue water and the green water, and how does now what we're doing, the decisions we're making and the solutions we're leading, and any allocation we're doing even in terms of finance, how does it also include include these diverse knowledge systems. And of course, the aspect of ensuring that the governance is inclusive and intersectional. We've often looked at water as, something that comes as an afterthought, but now we've been able to see how much water is a connector, how much water is actually an organizing principle. It flows through all the sustainable development goals, and we must look at it as it is, because without water, then it means we cannot meet our climate targets. Without water, again, we cannot be able to meet our biodiversity target. So that intersectional governance also is something that has been very well brought out, so that we don't just see water as something that is on the sidelines, but it's something that affects our day-to-day life, and it's actually our lifeline. And of course, we've been able to see that we can actually move to a more equitable and sustainable water future. And these are some of the key components that can be able to make us to get there. And they're just like clear definitions, for example, of one way that how do we ensure that all the children before the age of 5 do not die from a water-related cause. So these are key critical issues that connect to humanity, that connect to people, that connect to how our actions today can be able to affect, different groups, different vulnerable groups, and also can be able to affect different generations. And a just water future cannot be able to happen without the largest majority of the population, that is the young people. We have more than half of the world's population being young, and in sub-Saharan Africa, we have more than 70% below the age of 30. And so we're talking about a just water future. For example, in the African continent, by the year 2050, we're going to have the largest workforce in the world. So how prepared have we, made that population that is going to lead that world and that just water future, in terms of how we're skilling them, in terms of how we are embracing, for example, the young water professionals, making sure that it's coming up more and more within our engagements. And we were able to speak to a lot of young people in various forums, the water forum in Bali, in Stockholm as well. And some of the key issues were coming up, especially why more and more within the water space, we've not seen a lot of vibrancy and support, especially to the young, water professionals and young people within the water space, as it has been seen in other spaces like in the climate and biodiversity space. So we have an opportunity there to be able to accelerate our efforts, to be able to see the young people as actually actors within the space, because they're leading initiatives and solutions. And there's some key perspectives that we highlighted as well. And one of them was, how do we invest in youth leadership to ensure that both governments and the private sector actors can also prioritize funding for education, for capacity building, and youth-led initiatives, especially in the regions that are water stressed. And then number 2, how do we ensure that inclusion in decision making, young people, making sure that we just go beyond mere representation and ensure that actually the decisions being made are youth-centered, are looking at that just water future with the majority of the population that are going to live in it, and making sure especially that it's systematically integrated, especially into the global governance frameworks, and also from the local councils to the global conventions. And just ensuring that we have a very robust representation and accountability within the system that is going to look at what kind of future and how ready are we for the challenges of the future. And then the third component was, how do we promote green jobs and entrepreneurship? Governments within these conversations, we're calling up them to shape the labor markets and influence job creation in sustainability, innovation, and other sectors alike, aiming to integrate young professionals into the economy, while also offering the dignified, adequate compensation for their work. And the last component we looked at is the support on financial mechanisms for the young people. How do we establish dedicated funding pools and incentives for youth-led water projects, ensuring that their ideas have the resources to scale and succeed? So these are some of the key components that you will see much more deeply when you read the youth preface, and also the integration of the same within the bigger components of the report. So this is something that we have to do if we are to really create and realize just water future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thanks so much for giving us this comprehensive, very personal overview, and from commissioners having worked on this report and together for the last two years. So thanks so much. Warm round of applause, and before we move to the second part of this panel, thank you. Yeah. Amgad, you have to leave, eh? at 10. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, that's what it is. Like to invite Jirker, Riaz, Daniel, and Jesus. You're welcome, Amgad, if you want to join, but yeah, yeah, okay. Why don't you take my seat? Yeah, please. Yeah, if you sit here, and because because he has to leave. Yeah. I did my best with the Global Commission when we started the Commission to have a representation from across the world, a representation from all generations, but also have a real good gender plus balance. Something went wrong today. I got nothing against my male counterparts, but this is not a representation, and definitely not. Well, we had a panel just now where Majun were, of course, outnumbered by Naoko and Liz, and this was also true for the Commission. But I do want to say that you are, in your suits, female at heart. So that is for sure a thing why we're very happy and why I'm very happy that we have you here. And I have to start with Amgad because you have to move to a next panel. From the Green Climate Fund, leading water in that Green Climate Fund. Can you say something already on the applicability of the Global Commission on the Economics and Water recommendations in the context of the work you're doing, in the context of this COP? Amgad.
Can you hear me now? Yes. So thanks, Henk, for that. I think when I look at the report, I think it's very aligned with what we call it, like how we drive change. So to drive a change in GCF, because GCF been established really to do that paradigm shifting in all sectors that we found, including the water sector. And we have put for ourselves like 4 principles to drive that change. The first one is really integrated planning, where we talk about like, the governance system, integrated policy plan, bring water into climate plan, and also avoid that silo sector planning as well. The second element or second principle for us is how really we bring that paradigm shifting. And that in terms of how we promote technology, how we transfer technology, scale up the solution, replicate the good intervention or the good solution that being pilot and tested and being validated. The third one comes to the finance, and that's how we really leverage the finance in the water sector. And if we look like how GCF actually doing this, so we work across all the flexible financial instruments, from grant to concessional loan to guarantees to bond and so on. And that really allow us to work for like for each dollar we invest, we try to mobilize the private sector, bring the other co-finance, bring other co-investors with us. So on average in the water sector in GCF, we have funded like 3 billion from our money, and those 3 billion actually raise up 15 billion. So in average, it's like 1 to 3 in most of the project, but there were some projects we've been able really to bring it to 1 to 6, 1 to 5.6, which really become as like a regional facility that really attract all other investors. The last principle that we are working on, which is really like, as you mentioned at the use, the knowledge management, the peer-to-peer learning, build that community of practice. So I think all the recommendations that actually coming in the report, it's very aligned with our making a change or derive a change using our financial capacity at the Green Climate Fund.
Thanks so much, Amgad. And I think the word change in the way it works across the GCF work portfolio and how it lands on the ground in relationship to the Commission is key. Second, you know that from the Commission, we are ready to work with you, with the GCF, to make sure that that change actually happens. So thanks so much for being with us. I go to B. Implications beyond water, you could say, in the larger portfolio of the European Investment Bank. How do you see the Global Commission on Economics and Water report, its recommendation play out, and opportunities is forward within the EIB?
Okay, well, firstly, the EIB is delighted to be engaging in this event. Making the link really between the three Rio Conventions of biodiversity, climate and combating diversification, welcomes the Global Commission's study and its calls for a bolder and more integrated action. In terms of EIB, let's say, recent experience of this kind of integration, we have been prioritizing and therefore tracking much more closely since 2021 our financing in support of the 6 sustainable finance objectives of the EU sustainable finance taxonomy. That is climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, biodiversity, pollution prevention, circular economy, and the sustainable use and protection of water and marine resources. And what we are seeing as we track this finance more closely is really that interaction that we're talking about, really the dual and sometimes triple benefits. When we look at our climate adaptation finance last year of 3 billion, 60% of that was also ticking the box of contributing to the water objectives. When you add agriculture, that goes even larger, and water is also, of course, contributing to the biodiversity, to the pollution prevention and control, to the circular economy objectives, as well as climate change mitigation. As the connector, as I've heard today, in terms of where this leaves us moving forward, how the study influences us. As the European Investment Bank, our commitment, at least through the end of next year, to be revised is to finance at least 50% of overall EIB finance to be supporting those 6 sustainability objectives. Last year we were up to 60%, 44 billion euros in support of those objectives. And we also have a sub-target of 15% of overall EIB climate action finance going to climate adaptation. Last year, that amounted to approximately 3 billion euros. As mentioned, 60% of that also in the water sector, but still amounting only to 6% of overall climate finance. And this, to me, really points out the issue that we have with climate adaptation and also with biodiversity, because as has been mentioned, these are public goods, often not revenue generating, and so we really need, again, as the report underlines, we need the patient finance, we need the concessional finance in order to make these investments happen. EIB is blessed with being able to lend at very long tenures, blessed in being able to be flexible in terms of its requirements, its lending conditions. Within the EU, we're able to engage EU guarantees to facilitate borrowing by promoters who may not otherwise be able to. Outside the EU, of course, more challenging, but in some areas we're able to engage EU grants, for example, through neighbourhood investment program in order to support borrowing. Also to encourage results-based lending and other innovations in order to bring in private sector finance. Looking forward in terms of the recommendations of the report, very interested to note the recommendation about just water partnerships. To me, that immediately rings the bell of the just energy transition partnerships that G7 has been leading on, and that alongside the Commission that EIB has stepped up to support. This year, alongside other MDBs, we've been doing a lot of research on our experience there, our experience with MDBs supporting other climate country platforms in Egypt, North Macedonia, and more recently in Bangladesh. And really the main conclusion that we have reached is that you can't just do energy, you can't just do mitigation. You need to look at adaptation, you need to look at biodiversity. When you look at the Egypt platform, it's water, it's food, and it's energy. So it's bringing the three together. And that's really the way forward. Thank you. We look forward to discussing further in Riyadh.
Thanks so much, Daniel, and thanks for giving this wide overview, but also how you're more or less already working with our recommendation. At the same time, it is a contribution to strengthen what you're doing, and I think we look forward to explore what that strengthening could mean in practice in the months and years ahead. Thanks so much for sharing. I go to Riaz on the ground in Bangladesh. You've been a water ambassador in your role as ambassador to the Netherlands, but back in Bangladesh, knowing how important water is for your country, your economy and society and the environment, share a bit how you see how such a report, which takes a global as well as a local perspective, can really play a significant role in the context of Bangladesh.
Thank you, Henk. I'm reminded as I was listening to the commissioners and also EIB, a century back, Keynes said that in the long run, we all are dead. And looks like when we look at water, #water, and when we were also negotiating SDG 6, we're straddling between the short-term gains and long-term interest. And water possibly is one of the more imminent thing which actually continues to fall through the crack. We suffer from it. We know the potential, but when you try to bring, say, you suffer, can you come and tap the potential? Then we see a lot of things getting very fractious. Now, first thing first, I think we need to destigmatize water. What do I mean that? Meaning that there's so much of myths and perception within bracket misperception. Look at Bangladesh. We think that we are water endowed country. Practically 7 months of the year, we are dry. Then where is the water going to come? And we look at, we also look at, you're mentioning to biodiversity. 10% of Bangladesh landmass that's a wetlands. We ourselves don't value, but that's been integral to our culture, identity, if not. But then what? So this perception myth is continuously suffering, and now that we're a country trying to grow, going for industrialization, going for massive urbanization, look at it, 40% living in urban space, half of the population by 2030. What's going to be the water future or the scenarios? One of the other things is that we love to look in terms of planning, in terms of holding assumptions. By the time it comes to the ground, things go awry in 3 to 5 years' time. So the whole projectization in terms of water or in the intersectionality of water, someone said, I think it's going to be extremely dynamic, but we are not comfortable with that in the policy space. A couple of quick things very fast. I think we have to see that how, I understand, Madam Commissioner, you were saying about countries, but when you talk of green water, I think it's about communities. Why? Because I had the odd privilege of sitting in a transboundary water negotiation, and when it came to sharing between X party and Y party, and we said, how much are you going to leave to the ecosystem? People said, what is that? And this is reality. They said, no. So the competing demands and the trade-offs are killing the understanding, valuation. We love to know, we love to know that, but in terms of coming to the last mile action, then we say that is the last thing. So how, and then the data point is very critical. There are some interesting things there. So I think one of the other point is we'll also talk about incentivization, but incentivization in protection or preservation, conservation of biodiversity. How that we really badly need new economic models for that. Politics of water, if not geopolitics, but let's say politics of water. Politics of water within a federal state is one kind of, and within a unitary state also, because within the spatial distribution is increasingly under stress. But we shy away from that. We only look at seasonal distribution, but that's more of an average. So that has to be broken down, and that's where data can really help. And today when we have the access to geospatial data, I really urge, you talk about global water compact, something. Can we really unlock, going beyond the sovereignty prisms, do something where we, through the geospatial data on all of the technologies, including AI, can we unlock it for good, the way some Meta and others have done? There should be no reason not to have that. Silos and nexus. I think the governments are structured to operate in terms of sectoral basis. Fair enough. But increasingly we understand, but the moment you go to the government, many of the governments in the Western world also, I know, please excuse me for that, getting the multi-sectoral work between the ministries and departments is really difficult. But water is one of the things where you have to have that. And there's no one, water doesn't cry. Because water doesn't cry. So I always sometimes say, when it rains, we cry. When it doesn't rain, then also we cry. So how do we make ourselves understand? And last point of many other points is that Pricing. My question would be, pricing works in where things are really organized. Look at Bangladesh, for example, where good part, if not half, almost two of the economy is actually informal economy. And I bring a very odd example. If you go and tell a manufacturer that I'll price it high, he's ready possibly to pay it 2-3 times. But look at the cost of it. Cost is, he's going to do it at the cost of the next door marginal small farmers who doesn't have a voice, who doesn't have a face, and there could be millions. So there's a dichotomy. How do we work in the dichotomy where much of it is also straddling in informal economy? We need to think. And here, I mean, that's where biodiversity and the commons, and the local commons, I would say, not the regional commons, falls on the wayside. So these are things, this is a fantastic conversation. I think the report is the first step. It needs to go to the regions, populous regions, some water stressed, some apparently not yet water stressed, but there is water stress. I would end with one example again, that our myths and perceptions are so much dominating our mind. A city called Chennai in southern India went dry, practically dry for nearly 40 days in 2019. Didn't make headlines because there was no casualty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Riaz. And thanks so much for lending us in the context of your country. How important that if we want to achieve our goals, that awareness and capacity from a community all the way to the government is there. Next to highlighting the challenges that come with the fragmentation, the way our silos work, the capacity that is lacking, and that longer term goals not easily play out on a shorter term action base. Thanks so much. I go to Europe before I go to biodiversity. Jesus, you're working very hard on the EU water resiliency work. In its relationship to the Global Commission, we see, of course, many opportunities in help moving this forward. Can you share a little bit on where you are with that EU water resiliency strategy and what we can expect from that? But second, its linkages, of course, to the Global Commission's work.
Yes. So for those who are not familiar with EU policies, so one of the top priorities of President von der Leyen for her second mandate is this water resilience initiative. And preparing this, reading the report is, of course, music for our ears, because it reminds or it puts in the agenda elements that are super important for us. So if we do a little bit of legal archaeology in the European Union, in 2000 we had a water framework directive, which is precisely focused on the idea of integrated water management. And the report is about that. There are some elements, I'm going to do some cherry picking that we like particularly in the report. First of all, the topic of green water. It was mentioned by some, we think that this makes a strong link between water management, biodiversity, climate change. So, and also the importance of this trans-sector approach. So we have to take into account, even when we design our policies, but policies like energy or food, we have to take into account the nexuses. And this is something that in the past we have been missing, despite having this framework, water framework directive policy. Then there is another super important point for us that we like a lot, which is water efficiency. Because as you know, circular economy is one of the top priorities also for the European Union, not only for ecological reasons, but also economic. And what does it mean for water? It means water efficiency, but it means also thinking on a possible water efficiency first. So thinking about water efficiency every time we think about business, investments, or policy decisions. And then to end, this is a personal observation, a personal call that I want to do this. We are all here super convinced about the importance of water. I'm following a little bit the negotiations. But what surprises me is that in the negotiation room, even when we talk about adaptation, water, but the same happens with circular economy or biodiversity, is not present. So I have the feeling of a big disconnection between what we are doing in the rooms, in the meeting, in the conference rooms, and what is happening in the negotiation rooms. And I think we have to think seriously about this because there is something that doesn't work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesus. And you touch a nerve. Having led together with Tajikistan, but on behalf of the Netherlands, the UN 2023 Water Conference, coming from a long period of figuring out how to ensure that water has a home institutionally in the context of our negotiation, this is very tough. There is no UN agency on water. Luckily, since November 1, we have a water envoy, Retno Marsudi, former Minister of Foreign Affairs from Indonesia, now leads the charge. She just started, she was here last week, towards the UN 2026 Water Conference. If we all move from this pavilion to the UAE pavilion right after this panel, we can follow a little bit the discussions towards UN 2026. But that lack of institutional capacity plays out in that it's lacking in the negotiations. There's a lot of talk about it, but because it's not part of the formal negotiation, there is a lack of action formally in the context of that. And that brings me nicely to Jirker and Ramsar and the biodiversity COP we just left towards the Ramsar COP next year. Water plays out in biodiversity, but the other thing is too, without a stable biodiversity, without that biodiversity as a source for our hydrological cycle, we can forget about stabilizing that hydrological cycle and we can forget about anything else. So these interlinkages between the two play out in a CBD context, in a COP context where we are, the desertification COP that is coming up, the 3 Rio Convention, the Ramsar Convention, and you could wish a water convention in the making. How do you see that relationship, one, and second, that outlook from here, coming from Cali to Riyadh, on our way to the Ramsar COP and UN 26? And what is the opportunity you see in the context of what we put out with the work of the Global Commission?
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Henk. Good to be here. And in fact, just this transition here is the perfect place to start. I think water, as you said, it doesn't have its own intergovernmental process. It doesn't have a dedicated intergovernmental process on water. So water in that sense doesn't have a home, but water flows pretty well. And it has many homes, I would argue. And we just have to somehow make a better case of using them appropriately. We do see, this is not to disagree with you. I think that's exactly the challenge. But there is an opportunity to use the frameworks we have in a much more structured and efficient way. But it requires a lot of diligence and hard work. I think this is why your report, the Commission's report, is actually very important, because it provides a very credible, science-based articulation of something we probably all knew a lot of it. Now we have new numbers. Now we have a different package. Now we have something very powerful. And so it's to say, the issue of green water, it is hugely important simply because it puts in stark contrast the importance of linking biodiversity with water. We cannot have water discussions without thinking about where that water ultimately comes from or what system actually enables our use of it. Now the Convention on Wetlands, the Ramsar Convention, it is focused on a subset of ecosystems in the world, but very important ones. They are the systems from which we draw our water. Just about all the human use of water, whether for irrigation or sanitation or your showers and your drinking water, it's from wetlands. And so what happens to wetlands happens to our water. And of course this interlinkages with forest and wetlands and to rainfall is enormously important. So the Convention on Wetlands in that sense is a water convention from the perspective of the systems that provide us with the water. We should use it as such. There is of course also a water convention on transboundary waters on rivers within the UN Economic Commissions for Europe, etc. In CBD we don't have a dedicated water agenda item, but there is a program of work on inland water biodiversity, which is very strongly linked to our convention, and that should also be leveraged and utilized to the greatest extent. But these are party-driven processes. And so the same thing is here within the climate dialogue. There's absolutely more space to do more work, but a lot of it can be done within the structures that exist. And so there is nothing preventing countries from integrating ambitious wetlands actions in their NDCs with mitigation and adaptation outcomes. And in fact, there's a huge need to do that much, much more. It's something that we are trying to support. I think from the last COP in Dubai, there was significant progress in relation to the global goal on adaptation and how, that gives explicit recognition for the need of biodiversity and ecosystems. So we can work with the systems we have. We have to use these opportunities to, and I think you said it, have this river that runs through the different COPs. And eventually also the COP15 of the Convention on Wetlands in Zimbabwe, in Victoria Falls. It has a river, the Zambezi, it's more than symbolism. And towards the UN Water Conference. And, we will just run to the next session focusing specifically on that. I think the opportunity is to make that conference take another step at pulling these things together to a greater extent than may have been possible before. The journey is there, but can we do more of it? And maybe two more things, if you'll allow me the time, Hank. I wanted to come back to a couple of points of the importance of data was mentioned in the previous panel, the need for information to really support our actions. So we are working heavily on inventory, supporting contracting parties with the national wetland inventory. The reason being that wetland data is often very poor. It remains too poor. And if that's poor, then it means that we don't understand how we manage this system for water services very well. And so big area of work. Second is that now we have this amazing articulation of global water cycle and so on. But most decisions are still made at the national level or even subnational level. So how do we create this data environment at the national level to support the right national level planning decisions in whichever sector you want? Here we're talking about ecosystem management, conservation, agricultural development, industrial development, urban development. How do we plan livable cities without thinking about water and wetlands within that space? And so these are ongoing areas of work that are partly addressed within our convention framework, but they are also partly addressed elsewhere. And so making more of that. Last point on that is also, this is the data that enables us to get towards the right incentivization. We have to value things in some ways. We have to put in place the right incentives. If we want to work towards water efficiency, how do we incentivize working towards water efficiency? Much of which happens in the private sector. How do we remove the incentives currently in place that actually enable sectors not to be water efficient or not to be biodiversity efficient? And I think then we will have some serious impact at different levels that is actually cohesive and coherent. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for sharing not only the linkages, also highlighting what we did in the report, how water is already part of so many of our agreements, but not taken out as a driving force. And I think this is the real value of our report and our findings, is that when water becomes an organizing principle, it is a lever, and provides leverage for the existing capacities that we have, capacities that are already institutionalized, that are within our financial context, but are also definitely related to actions on the ground. So this has been a very rich conversation, presenting you with, one, the information from the commissioners, and second, perspectives from on the ground practice and how it works, financing, both from the Green Climate Fund and the European Investment Bank, and perspectives from the European Union and the Ramsar Convention. I really want to thank this panel again, a big hand of applause. I want to thank you for listening in on this information. Don't hesitate to reach out. Find our report online, watercommission.org. And reach out to us as a secretariat if you want to move forward with some of the actions or find our commissioners on the ground here at the COP. Also find us at the Water Pavilion later this week. And really look forward to work with you in the context of driving water action on all those layers across all those sectors, from that short-term incentive towards that longer-term perspective of a stable hydrological cycle for a global common good. Thank you so much.